I don't know why I decided to go camping alone. Maybe I just wanted some peace to clear my head. Life in the city had started to feel suffocating, and the thought of escaping into the wilderness for a few days sounded like the perfect reset. I had done a few solo camping trips before, but nothing too extreme. Just a couple of nights in well-established campgrounds, the kind with other campers nearby. This time, I wanted something different, complete isolation. I wanted to be alone with nothing but the trees and the sound of nature. I chose a remote area deep in the national forest, far from any designated sites. I had spent a few days researching and found a spot that seemed perfect. It was about 10 miles off the main road, accessible only by a narrow dirt path. From there, I'd have to hike another few miles to reach a secluded clearing near a river. It seemed untouched, like no one had camped there in years. I packed everything I thought I would need: a tent, a sleeping bag, a small camping stove, enough food for a few days, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and of course my hunting knife just in case. I told a friend where I was going, gave him a rough idea of when I'd be back, and then I was off. The drive out was uneventful, just long stretches of empty roads surrounded by dense forest. Eventually, I reached the dirt path leading to my intended starting point. My truck barely made it through the overgrown trail, branches scraping against the sides. When I finally arrived, I felt a strange sense of unease. Not fear, just an odd feeling, like I was being watched. I brushed it off. I was probably just excited or maybe a little nervous. The hike in was harder than I expected. The terrain was rough, the ground uneven. The deeper I went, the quieter everything seemed to become. The usual sounds of the forest, birds, rustling leaves, felt distant, like they were muffled. Again, I pushed the thought away, focusing instead on getting to the spot before dark. When I arrived, the clearing was just as beautiful as I had hoped. A wide open space surrounded by towering pines, the river flowing gently nearby. I set up my tent, gathered some wood, and started a small fire as the sun began to set. The air was cool, crisp, the scent of pine strong in the breeze. Felt perfect. That first night, I barely slept. It wasn't because I was uncomfortable. My sleeping bag was warm, and the tent provided enough protection from the wind. It was the silence that kept me awake. It was too quiet. I had spent enough time in the woods to know that even at night, there should be noise, crickets, owls, the occasional rustling in the underbrush. But here there was nothing, just an eerie, complete stillness. Every now and then, I'd hear something like faint footsteps in the distance, but whenever I strained to listen, they would stop. It was probably just my mind playing tricks on me, I told myself. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. I stepped outside my tent and immediately noticed something odd. Some of the branches I had gathered the night before were scattered, like they had been kicked around. I also noticed fresh marks in the dirt, scuff marks, almost like something had been dragged. It didn't look like an animal, and I was sure I had arranged the wood neatly before going to sleep. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I must have just been groggy when I set up camp. I spent the day exploring the area, hiking along the river, and enjoying the solitude. But I couldn't shake that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like I wasn't as alone as I thought. At one point, I found deep impressions in the mud near the water's edge footprints. Not mine. They were larger than my own and spaced far apart, like someone or something had been moving quickly. I told myself it had to be another hiker, though I knew how unlikely that was. I had driven out to the middle of nowhere, then hiked even farther. No one should be out here. That night, I locked myself inside my tent earlier than usual. I kept my hunting knife close. The fire crackled outside, providing some comfort, but the silence felt heavier than before. I lay there, listening, straining to hear anything over the ringing in my ears. Then, just past midnight, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling my campsite. My blood ran cold. I held my breath, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. I wanted to convince myself it was just an animal, but the sound was too distinct, too human. The steps stopped just outside my tent. I could hear breathing, heavy and uneven. Then, a long silence. My heart pounded so hard I thought whoever was out there would hear it. And then, suddenly, my tent collapsed. I didn't scream, couldn't. I just slashed wildly with my knife, kicking and thrashing as the fabric wrapped around me. I fought my way out, gasping for air, swinging blindly. The fire had almost died down, but in its dim light, I saw movement just beyond the trees. A tall, shadowy figure standing completely still, watching me. I didn't wait. I grabbed my pack, my flashlight, and bolted. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the trees, branches cutting into my arms and face. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I just ran, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I reached my truck and jumped in, fumbling with the keys, hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped them. The engine roared to life and I floored it, tearing out of there so fast I barely stayed on the road. I drove straight home, not stopping, not thinking. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked every door, every window, and sat there, knife still clutched in my hand. I barely slept for days. When I finally worked up the courage to check my gear, I found something that made my stomach drop. My hunting knife, razor sharp when I packed it, was now dull, the blade chipped, as if it had hit something hard. I don't go camping alone anymore. I don't know how to explain what happened that night, but I remember every detail. I don't think I'll ever go camping alone again, and maybe not even with anyone else. The woods felt different after that night. Less like a peaceful escape and more like something alive, something waiting. I had been planning the trip for weeks, a solo camping trip deep in the forests of Oregon. I had done trips like this before, but never this far off trail. I wanted to challenge myself to feel that real isolation, to rely only on what I carried. I packed light, just the essentials. Tent, sleeping bag, food, water, a knife, and a small hatchet. I had my phone, but I turned it off once I got into the woods. No service anyway. I had a map and compass, but I felt confident enough in my skills to not worry. The hike in was long, nearly 6 miles from where I parked. I followed an old logging road for part of it, then cut off into the trees where the undergrowth thickened. By the time I found a spot to set up camp, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows between the trees. It was perfect, secluded, flat ground, near a small stream for water. I set up my tent quickly, got a fire going, and ate my dinner while the last bit of daylight drained from the sky. The sounds of the forest at night were familiar. Crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustling of small animals moving through the underbrush. I had always found it comforting, but that night something felt off. At first, it was subtle. The sounds seemed to stop just for a second. Then they came back, but something about them seemed different, like they were farther away. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just my imagination. I wasn't used to being this deep in the woods alone. I reminded myself that fear plays tricks on you. I banked the fire low and climbed into my tent, zipping myself in. My sleeping bag was warm, and I felt exhaustion pulling me down. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was awake, and something was wrong. The fire had burned down to embers, casting only a weak glow. The air felt colder. I listened. The forest was silent, too silent. No crickets, no wind, just nothing. Then a sound, faint, but unmistakable. Footsteps, not an animal. Too heavy, deliberate. I held my breath, heart hammering in my chest. The steps were slow, methodical, moving just outside my tent. They stopped for a long moment, and I could feel the presence of someone, just on the other side of that thin layer of fabric. I reached for my knife, gripping it tight. My fingers were slick with sweat. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my body was frozen. I tried to tell myself it was a deer, a bear maybe, but deep down I knew better. Animals don't move like that. The steps started again, circling the tent. I could hear breathing, not heavy, not labored, just steady, controlled. Then the worst part, something pressed against the fabric of my tent. A hand. I wanted to scream, but I choked it down. My mind raced. If I stayed, I was trapped. If I ran, I was vulnerable. My knife felt small, useless. The pressure against the tent stayed there for what felt like an eternity. Then, it was gone. Silence. I forced myself to move slowly, carefully. I reached for the zipper of my tent, easing it down as quietly as I could. My other hand gripped the knife so tightly my fingers ached. The cold air rushed in as I peeled back the flap. Nothing. The fire cast faint light on the trees, flickering against the darkness. My breath came fast and shallow. I scanned the area, straining my eyes, my ears. I saw no movement, no sign of anything. Then I noticed something. My backpack. It had been hanging from a low branch a few feet away, out of reach of scavengers. But now it was on the ground, open. The contents spilled out. Someone had been in my camp. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some trick of the mind. I wasn't imagining it. Someone had been here, watching me, close enough to touch my tent, close enough to go through my things. I knew I couldn't stay. Moving as quietly as possible, I packed up, keeping my knife in hand. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would give me away. I kicked dirt over the embers of the fire, leaving my camp in darkness. Then I started walking, fast but careful. I didn't turn on my flashlight. I didn't want to be seen. Every few steps I stopped to listen. The forest was still eerily silent. My skin crawled with the feeling of being watched, but I never saw anything. I just kept moving, pushing forward through the dark. It took me nearly 2 hours to get back to my car. I didn't run. I didn't want to make noise, but I moved as quickly as I dared. When I finally saw the faint reflection of my car's taillights in the distance, I almost collapsed from relief. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there, shaking. I turned on my phone. No service. I didn't care. I started the engine and drove, not looking back. I don't know who was out there. I don't know what they wanted. Maybe they were just messing with me. Maybe it was something worse. All I know is that I won't be going back. Not ever. I always loved camping, but after what happened last summer, I don't think I'll ever do it again. It still feels fresh in my mind. Every little detail, every sound, every mistake I made that night. It started as a simple solo trip. I had been camping alone plenty of times before. I liked the quiet, the disconnect from everything. Just me, the trees, and the sounds of nature. It had always felt peaceful. I picked a spot deep in the woods, about 10 miles from the nearest road. The trail wasn't well traveled, which was perfect. I wanted isolation, no chance of running into noisy hikers or people playing music on Bluetooth speakers. I packed light. A tent, a sleeping bag, some food, a water filter, a knife, and a small hatchet for cutting firewood. Enough to be comfortable but not weighed down. The first day was fine. The hike in was long, but I enjoyed the steady rhythm of my boots on the dirt, the crunch of leaves underfoot. The sun filtered through the trees, and a light breeze kept the air cool. I found a clearing beside a small stream and set up camp. The trees were dense enough to feel enclosed, but there was enough open space to see the stars at night. I spent the evening collecting firewood and cooking a simple meal, just some canned beans and beef jerky. As the sun set, the temperature dropped, and the forest grew quiet. It was peaceful, exactly what I wanted. The only sounds were the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of leaves in the wind. I sat by the fire, staring into the flames, completely content. But then, sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. I lay still, listening. The fire had died down to embers, casting a faint glow around my tent. The night was silent, too silent. If you've ever been deep in the woods, you know there's always some noise. The wind, crickets, the occasional crack of a branch. But this was complete stillness. Felt wrong. My gut tightened, but I told myself it was nothing. Just my mind playing tricks on me. I rolled over and tried to sleep. Then I heard it. A soft crunch. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, close. I held my breath, listening. My tent was zipped up, so I couldn't see anything outside. My fire was nearly out, offering no real light beyond the dim glow of dying embers. The footsteps stopped. I waited, heart pounding. Nothing. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, maybe, but I didn't really believe it. The steps had been too careful, too controlled. I lay there for what felt like an hour before exhaustion finally took over, and I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, everything seemed normal. There were no tracks around my tent, no signs that anything had been there. I convinced myself I had imagined it, but I couldn't shake the unease. I spent the day hiking, trying to distract myself. I followed the stream for a few miles, moving through dense trees and overgrown paths. It was beautiful, untouched, but something felt off, like I wasn't alone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the trees. I never saw anything, but the feeling didn't go away. By the time I got back to camp, the sun was low in the sky. I forced myself to shake the feeling, made a fire, and cooked dinner. But that night, I couldn't relax. I kept my knife close, every little sound making me jump. Then, just as I was starting to doze off, I heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. My hand gripped my knife. The steps were slow, circling my tent. I could hear the crunch of leaves, the subtle shift of weight with each step, and then breathing, right outside my tent. Low, steady, almost measured, like someone was standing just inches away, listening. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My body was frozen. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the breathing stopped. The footsteps moved away, slow, deliberate, fading into the distance. I stayed awake until the sun rose, clutching my knife so tightly my hand ached. When morning came, I unzipped my tent slowly, cautiously. The forest was bright, the stream still flowing, everything looking normal. But I wasn't imagining things. There, in the dirt around my tent, were footprints.
Bare footprints.
Human, not animal, not boots, bare feet. They circled my tent, stopping right beside where my head had been. I packed my things as fast as I could. My hands were shaking as I stuffed my sleeping bag into my pack, kicked dirt over the fire pit. I didn't eat, didn't drink. I just needed to leave. The hike back felt different. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like someone watching. I moved fast, faster than I ever had with a full pack. My legs burned, but I didn't stop. When I finally saw my car, I nearly cried. I threw my pack in the back, locked the doors the second I got inside. Only then did I let myself breathe. I never told anyone the full story, just said I cut my trip short. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and I know someone was out there, watching. had always loved camping, being out in the wilderness, surrounded by nothing but trees, the sound of a running river nearby, and the distant call of an owl. It always felt like the perfect escape from the noise of everyday life. But after what happened on my last trip, I don't think I'll ever set foot in the woods again. It was late September when I set out. I had planned a solo trip deep into the national forest, far from any established campsites. I wanted solitude, real isolation. I found a spot about 10 miles from the nearest road, a clearing surrounded by thick trees with just enough space for my tent and a small fire. It was perfect, or so I thought. The first day went by without anything unusual. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and cooked a simple meal. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and the silence of the forest became more pronounced. Lying in my sleeping bag, I could hear the faint rustling of leaves outside, probably just the wind, maybe a small animal. I fell asleep quickly. I woke up in the middle of the night. It wasn't a sound that woke me, but a feeling. You know that strange sense you get when someone is watching you? That's what it was. I lay still, listening. The fire had died down to just glowing embers, and the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just silence. I held my breath, straining my ears. Then, just outside my tent, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not an animal. Too heavy, too controlled. My mind raced. I was 10 miles from the nearest road. No one should be out here. I reached for the knife I kept next to me in the tent and held it tight. The footsteps circled my tent, moving carefully. I could hear the crunch of leaves under each step. Then they stopped, right at the entrance. I stayed completely still. My heart pounded so loud I was sure whoever or whatever was outside could hear it. The zipper of my tent was just inches from my face, and for a terrifying moment, I expected it to start moving, expected to see the fabric peel open to reveal something standing there. But nothing happened. The seconds stretched on like hours. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps started again, slowly walking away, deeper into the woods. I didn't move. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, gripping my knife, waiting for the sun to rise. When morning came, I unzipped my tent slowly, knife still in my hand. The clearing looked just as I had left it. There were no signs of anything unusual, no footprints, no broken branches. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just paranoia from being alone in the woods. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. But a part of me knew better. I decided to stay another night. Leaving meant hiking back alone, and I wasn't sure if that was safer or more dangerous. I spent the day exploring, trying to push the fear from my mind. But I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling watched. Every little noise made me jump. A squirrel darting through the leaves made my heart pound. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. As the sun set, I built my fire bigger than the night before, hoping it would keep whatever was out there away. I sat close to it, my back to my tent, watching the darkness creep in between the trees. The forest felt different tonight, heavy, like it was waiting. I didn't go to bed right away. I sat by the fire, staring into the darkness, listening. Nothing, just the crackling of the flames. But then, around midnight, I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, they were coming from the trees directly in front of me. Slow, steady, closer. I gripped my knife, my pulse hammering in my ears. I stared into the darkness, but I couldn't see anything past the firelight. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I didn't move. Then, just on the edge of the fire's glow, I saw it. A figure, not an animal, person, standing still, watching me. I couldn't see their face, just the outline of their body, barely visible in the darkness. They didn't move, neither did I. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Seconds? Minutes? My mind screamed at me to do something, but I was frozen. Then, as slowly as they had appeared, they stepped backward, disappearing into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the fire going until the sky started to lighten. The moment the sun was up, I packed my gear and left. I didn't stop hiking. I didn't take breaks. I just walked, faster than I ever had in my life, until I reached my car. As I drove away, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone standing at the tree line, watching me. But there was nothing, just trees, just the empty, silent forest. I don't know who was out there. I don't know what they wanted. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe they were just watching. Or maybe they were waiting for something. But I do know one thing. I'll never camp alone again. I never liked camping, not because of the woods or the dark, but because being out there made me feel exposed, vulnerable. But my friends convinced me, like they always did. It was supposed to be a weekend trip, just 3 nights in the middle of nowhere, away from everything. No phone service, no roads, no people. Just us, a couple of tents, and whatever we packed. The drive out took longer than expected. We left late in the afternoon, and by the time we reached the dirt road leading to the campsite, the sun had already dipped below the tree line. The road itself was barely a road, just a narrow, uneven path of packed dirt with deep grooves from where rain had eroded it over time. Felt like my car was being shaken apart. We kept going deeper and deeper until there was nothing but thick trees on both sides. No sign of life, no other campers. Exactly what we wanted, or at least what they wanted. We finally reached the clearing just as dusk set in. It was a small opening in the woods, barely big enough for our tents and a fire pit. Beyond the clearing, the trees pressed in like a wall. We unloaded our gear, set up the tents, and started a fire. The warmth was nice, but the way the flames flickered against the tree trunks made everything feel claustrophobic. The first night was uneventful. I didn't sleep well. Every sound, every snap of a branch, every rustle in the leaves felt too close, but it was just the forest. It always sounds louder at night. The second day we explored. We hiked for hours, following a narrow trail that wound through the trees. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. At one point, I realized I couldn't hear anything anymore. No birds, no insects, just silence. I mentioned it, but the others shrugged it off. Eventually, we found a creek and decided to rest. The water was clear, but something about it felt wrong. Too still, like it didn't belong there. I drank from my bottle instead. That evening, as we sat around the fire, I started feeling uneasy again. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling. The trees felt closer. The darkness between them seemed deeper. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see something, but there was nothing, just the trees. That night, I woke up suddenly. It was dead silent outside. No wind, no animals, nothing. I sat up, trying to shake the feeling of unease. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the trees behind our tents. I held my breath, listening. It stopped. Then I heard another sound, something dragging. It wasn't an animal. It was heavier, human. I wanted to wake the others, but I didn't want to make noise. I stayed still, barely breathing. Minutes passed. The sounds didn't return. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just my imagination and forced myself to lie back down. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I checked around our camp. There were marks in the dirt. Not footprints, not exactly. More like something had been dragged. My stomach twisted. I showed the others, but they laughed it off. Probably just a deer, they said. Relax. I tried. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That day, I stayed near camp while the others went exploring. I couldn't bring myself to leave. As I gathered firewood, I kept hearing sounds. Branches snapping, leaves rustling. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there. The feeling of being watched never left. That night, it got worse. I woke up again. This time, I didn't move. I just listened. The footsteps were back. Closer this time. Then I heard breathing. Slow, deep, right outside my tent. I squeezed my eyes shut. My mind raced. If I moved, would it know I was awake? My heart pounded so hard I thought it would hear me. Then scraping, right against the fabric of my tent. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted upright and grabbed my flashlight, clicking it on in one motion. The beam cut through the darkness. Nothing. The sounds stopped. My hands were shaking as I unzipped the tent. I shined the light outside. The ground was disturbed. The dirt scraped away in long lines. But no footprints. I woke the others. They grumbled, half asleep, but when they saw the marks outside my tent, they finally took me seriously. We argued about leaving, but it was the middle of the night. We decided to stay awake, keep watch until morning. The sounds never came back. As soon as the sun rose, we packed up. No one argued. No one spoke. We just wanted to get out of there. The drive back was silent. We reached the main road, and only then did I feel like I could breathe again. Whatever had been out there, whatever had been watching us, it let us go. We never went camping again. I've been camping plenty of times before, but this trip was different. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend alone in the wilderness, just me and nature. I packed light, just the essentials. My tent, sleeping bag, a small gas stove, a flashlight, and a hunting knife. Food was kept simple. A few protein bars, a couple of cans of beans, and some bottled water. I wasn't planning on staying too long, just from Friday evening to Sunday morning. A quick reset away from work, away from people. The drive took about 3 hours from the city, through winding roads and deep into a national forest. The sun was already dipping low by the time I found a spot. It was perfect, far from any official campsite, deep in the trees with a small clearing for my tent. There was a stream nearby, so water wouldn't be an issue if I needed more. The place felt isolated, which was exactly what I wanted. I set up my tent quickly, making sure it was on flat ground and secure. The forest around me was silent except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. No distant voices, no cars, just pure stillness. I liked that. After getting everything in order, I sat down on a fallen log and ate a quick meal. The temperature was dropping now, and the sounds of the forest changed. Crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, and somewhere far off, the rustling of some animal moving through the underbrush. It was normal. It was expected. That first night, I slept well. The ground beneath me was cold but firm, and the tent gave me just enough protection to feel secure. At some point in the night, I thought I heard something, a crunch of leaves just outside my tent. But when I listened, it was gone. Probably just the wind. I rolled over and fell back asleep. Saturday morning started slow. I boiled some water on my small stove for coffee, stretched out my legs, and went for a short walk around my campsite. The air was crisp, the trees tall and endless. Felt good to be away. By midday, I decided to hike up a nearby ridge. I packed some snacks, my knife, and my flashlight just in case, though I planned to be back before dark. The hike was steep, but nothing too bad. The ridge overlooked the valley below, thick with trees, stretching out far beyond what my eyes could take in. I stood there for a long time just taking it in. That's when I noticed something, a faint, unnatural shape among the trees below. It looked like a structure, maybe a cabin? I hadn't seen anything like it on my way in. It was old, half collapsed, with a sagging roof and walls that barely held together. Just an abandoned hunting shack, probably. But something about it felt off, out of place. Still, I wasn't here to explore old buildings, so I turned back toward my campsite. As I made my way down, I felt something I hadn't before. It wasn't fear exactly, but a deep, nagging unease, like I was being watched. The feeling stuck with me all the way back to my tent. When I got there, something wasn't right. My backpack, where I had left my food, was open. Not torn apart, not scattered, just unzipped. At first, I thought maybe a raccoon had managed to get into it, but no food was missing. My knife was still there. Everything was untouched, but the bag was definitely open. I looked around, scanning the trees, my heart pounding now. Nothing moved.
No sounds.
Just the quiet hum of the forest. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself that maybe I had left it open by accident. I forced myself to go about my evening as usual. As night fell, I built a small fire, keeping it low. The forest felt different now. The silence was heavier. The occasional crack of a branch somewhere beyond my sightline put me on edge. Maybe it was just the loneliness getting to me. I told myself that. I barely slept that night. Every sound made my muscles tense. At one point, I was sure I heard footsteps, slow and careful, just outside my tent. But I never unzipped it. I just held my breath, gripping my knife, waiting. And then it was morning. I stepped outside, exhausted, and scanned my campsite. Nothing was out of place this time, but I knew something wasn't right. My gut told me to leave. I packed up my things as quickly as possible. Every few minutes, I glanced toward the trees, half expecting something to step out. I had no proof, no real reason to believe I was in danger, but I knew. I hiked back to my car in record time. The whole way, I felt that same unnerving sensation. Watched, followed, but I never saw anything, never heard anything. When I finally reached my car and locked the doors, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The trees stood still, indifferent. The forest remained silent. I started the engine and left, watching the trees in my rearview mirror. I never went back to that spot, and I never will. I had been looking forward to this camping trip for weeks. Just me, my gear, and the quiet of the wilderness. No people, no traffic, no distractions. Just the sounds of the forest, the scent of pine, and the crackling of a campfire at night. It was supposed to be peaceful, a reset. I drove 3 hours out of the city, deeper and deeper into the mountains, following an old dirt road that barely showed up on my GPS. Eventually, I reached the trailhead. It wasn't a popular spot. Exactly what I wanted. I parked, loaded my pack, and headed into the woods. The first few hours were perfect. The air was crisp, the trees tall and swaying gently. Birds chirped, and the occasional squirrel rustled in the underbrush. The trail was narrow but well-defined, winding through dense forest, occasionally opening into clearings where the sun streamed through. I planned to set up camp near a small lake I had read about. It wasn't an official campsite, just a spot I found on a map, but it seemed secluded and ideal. By late afternoon, I reached it. The lake was still, reflecting the trees around it. No other campers, no footprints, just silence. I set up my tent, got a fire going, and made a simple meal. As the sun dipped, the temperature dropped. I sat by the fire, staring into the flames, listening to the night sounds. An owl somewhere in the distance, the occasional splash from the lake, maybe a fish. Felt good to be alone. But as the night deepened, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling like the forest was watching. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was just the quiet playing tricks on me. Still, I felt uneasy. The trees felt closer, the darkness heavier. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't an animal, not the rustling of a deer or the distant call of a coyote. It was movement, slow, deliberate, footsteps. I froze, listening hard. It stopped, just the crackling fire and the wind in the trees. I shook my head, trying to push away the paranoia. Maybe it was a raccoon, maybe nothing. I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and lay still. The woods creaked and groaned like they always did. I closed my eyes, telling myself to relax. Sometime in the night, I woke up. I wasn't sure why at first. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, closer this time. I stayed still, barely breathing. The fire outside had died down to embers, casting only the faintest glow. The footsteps stopped right outside my tent. I could hear breathing, not animal breathing, human, slow and steady. My heart pounded. I had no weapon, just a small camping knife. My mind raced. Who was out here? There were no other cars at the trailhead, no signs of campers anywhere nearby. I had seen no one all day. Then scraping, right against my tent fabric. I couldn't move. I just lay there, gripping the knife, listening. The breathing was right outside. Whoever or whatever it was, they were standing inches from me, just standing there. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Felt like forever. Then, slowly, the breathing moved away. The footsteps retreated into the woods. I waited, forcing myself to stay still, ears straining. Nothing, just the wind. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there, every muscle tense, listening until the first hints of morning light seeped through the tent. As soon as it was bright enough, I crawled out, scanning the area. Nothing.
No footprints.
No signs of anyone. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it, that it was a dream, some half-awake nightmare. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I felt. I packed up quickly. The uneasy feeling hadn't left me. The whole forest felt wrong now, like it had changed overnight. Like I wasn't supposed to be here.
I hiket fast. Barely stoppning.
The woods seemed different in the daylight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind me, watching, following. When I finally reached my car, I threw my gear in and locked the doors. Only then did I let myself breathe. As I turned the key and the engine rumbled to life, I glanced back at the trailhead. Just for a second, that's when I saw it. At the edge of the trees, half hidden in the shadows, stood a figure. Not moving, just watching. I slammed the gas, peeling out of there, not looking back, not stopping. I don't know who or what was out there. I don't want to know. But I do know one thing. I'm never camping alone again.